The conversation about what is natural, what it means to live a more natural life, and what it means to be more in harmony with nature is something that is a pretty major defining thing and defining dynamic in the lives of a lot of people. And the odds are that if you're watching this presentation right now, you have either at some point have had this conversation, have had this thought, have had this question, and it's had some impact on your life. And I think within each of us, we have this desire, this drive, this real need to connect with something that is real and that is natural. And that's something that generates a real visceral response inside of our body, a response that is very satisfying at a deep, unconscious level. So for that very reason, and because it's such a powerful driver, the question is, don't you think it's important to maybe look at that and look at what our definitions are and if they're actually true? And if the questions we are asking are the right questions, and if the answers that we're getting are in fact the right answers and leading us in the right direction. This is important because direction determines destination. If you are leaving a port in a ship and you start off, a degree or a few degrees in the wrong direction, at the time, that seems pretty inconsequential because it's really negligible in the fact that you can't really perceive the difference. But over time, that angle really, really, really throws you off course, and you end up likely with a destination that you really don't want and that you didn't choose and you didn't plan for, you didn't pack for. Maybe you packed for a trip to go to Italy, and it's warm and it's going to be this and it's going to be that, and you have all these plans. Somehow you end up in like Greenland or Iceland, and it's a totally different scenario, and you're not prepared for it, you're not packed for it, you haven't planned for it. In the same way, that would be very inconvenient and very, more or less, kind of a waste of time and energy, and not really the best usage of our resources, meaning our time, our energy, our attention span, our intention. Because these things are all finite. We only have a certain amount of time during the day. We only have a certain amount of willpower every day, a certain amount of decision-making capabilities. So for that reason, these things are finite, and we need to use them as best as we can. So what we're going to look at in this video is basically what it actually means to be natural. We're going to look at it in a really simple way and pull from epigenetics, pull from genetics, pull from Chinese medicine in the sense of pre- and postnatal Jing. We're also going to look at really how we get trapped into fake definitions, really what are some real definitions, and then how this affects our health, and then some ways to apply it in the here and now. And people wanted to sometimes write off these kinds of questions, these kinds of conversations, because they're, oh, well, I'm only interested in health, and I just want to know what to eat, what to take, what exercise to do, and that's it. That's all I need to do. The reality is that oftentimes not looking at these sorts of things really undermines someone's health to a major, major degree, because a person is doing something that they're not designed for. In the same way that our human body is designed for a certain spectrum of nutrition, a certain spectrum of plants and foods that we can take in. There's foods that other mammals can eat that we just physically cannot eat. Our digestive system is not designed for it and it's not right for us. Sure, we may be able to physically masticate it or chew it and swallow it, but it's going to wreak havoc and really be pretty uncomfortable going through our digestive tract. In the same way, there's a lot of things that we might be able to physically do, but it's not going to be really what's right for us or what's right for our system or our constitution or our blueprint or whatever you want to call it. So starting off, let's look at our baseline sort of dichotomy or duality that we're going to use, which is this pre and postnatal. So prenatal is basically what you inherited and what you had before you were born. Postnatal is basically what you've accumulated since you were born. In an energetic sense, prenatal is the Jing energy that we inherit from our parents. It's our sort of genetic lineage or our constitution. And then our prenatal is once we come out of the womb and we start breathing, we start eating, then we're accumulating energy and accumulating things after we're out of the womb. Likewise, we can look at, we each have a unique DNA or a unique fingerprint, which comes from this prenatal essence. And then when we get down to our epigenetic expression, we can realize that, well, our unique DNA expression will be altered and influenced by our postnatal nutrition, meaning the choices we make, the thoughts we think, the food we take, our environment. Because that is what epigenetics is all about. It's about how our lifestyle factors and our environment affects our genetic expression. Because we have some DNA that is just on, and we have a whole bunch that is not really firing or not really active. And at first, science naively and ignorantly assumed that this was just junk DNA. And then that was all really overturned once they started to understand epigenetic expression, or really how your thoughts, your beliefs, your feelings, your emotions, your mental state, your spiritual state, your diet, your exercise patterns, all of these lifestyle things, how those things affect your genetics and your genetic expression. Meaning you might have a unique blueprint, and that blueprint might be distorted based on epigenetic expression or postnatal things that are happening. So this is an important thing to keep in the back of our mind as we're moving forward through this conversation about what is natural, what it means to live a natural life, and really how our usual mainstream understanding is not really accurate. So one thing we can look at also is a quote by Mark Twain, and it says, anytime that you find yourself on the side of the majority, it's time to take a step back and reflect and reassess where you are. Well, obviously, this whole conversation, being natural and being a natural life and being holistic health and whatever, is obviously a kind of minority conversation. Yet within that minority, there's also a majority. So the same principle applies. So we can see that, well, the majority of the people are really buying into this fake idea about everything is, or this fake idea about what it means to be natural. And they don't understand some of these key things. So then what are some examples of that? Well, some examples that are common and really prevalent in our world today is, people think because they eat a certain diet, vegan, vegetarian, paleo, organic, or they drive a certain car, or don't drive a certain car, or don't ride in cars, or don't ride in certain vehicles and only do this, or if they do yoga, or they meditate, or they chant, or they wear a certain kind of clothes, they shop at a certain store, they shop at Whole Foods, they shop at this store versus that store. The list really goes on for quite a while. And really these are all societally conditioned and created mechanisms. People get on the whole trip about, oh, it's natural to be vegetarian, it's natural to not eat meat. Well, it's not really natural considering that humanity pretty much for all of its existence has eaten animal products. Every indigenous culture that's ever existed, animal products. There's really only one vegetarian predominant society, and that's in India, and that's really not even the whole country. That's just certain niches and demographics. And even within that, they eat meats, they eat other kinds of animals, they just don't eat certain kinds because of religious and spiritual reasons. Which even that is a whole other different question, but really pulls into question this idea about what is natural, what is real. Well, the reality is that everything is natural. If it wasn't natural, it wouldn't exist. Because we exist in this dimension, in this realm, in this spectrum, in this matrix. And everything that is inside of it is natural. So really that whole conversation, that whole question is not really accurate, it's not really helpful, and it doesn't really get us much lasting success. It might make us feel good for a little bit, it might engage our ego, it might engage our mind, it might societally and culturally and socially do things for us. Yet at the core level or the genetic level or the DNA level, it's not really hitting the core, turning on the right switches, turning on the right buttons. Oftentimes it's really just creating more constraint or more negative, because under health we can see we have positive or negative or expansion or contraction. So really, these kinds of behaviors oftentimes create more contraction. And here's an example. Someone thinks, oh, well, I eat this way, so I'm more natural. And usually what that does is it sets up a whole dichotomy of, well, I'm better and I'm more enlightened and I'm more intelligent and educated and conscious and aware and evolved than all of these other people. And then a huge chunk of time and energy is spent converting people, lecturing people, judging people, condemning people, spreading the word about how you're better and how you're saved and how they need to be saved. And that's a huge construct. It's a huge drain of time and energy and resources. And most of the time it doesn't really feel that good because it's usually met with tension, anxiety, stress, worry, fear, and just engaging all these negative faculties in the brain and in the body. And that's just one example. And there's plenty of other examples where the same principle applies across the board. And really we can understand that most of these things were just created by companies and agencies to sell us things, to sell us products, which is why so many mainstream companies and brands like McDonald's or KFC or even other major corporations are shifting their image to look more natural, to look more green, and saying, oh, this product's all natural this, all natural that, which really they know doesn't mean anything. They know is completely devoid of substance and any sort of concreteness, but they know that it's a hot button for these kinds of people. So for that reason, we need to realize that, well, everything is natural. And while everything is natural, maybe it's not as harmonious. Maybe that is the better question. Maybe focusing on harmony is a better thing, is a better time, is a better usage of our time. In the same way that basically all notes on the musical scale are natural. If you're playing in B flat or A major or whatever, all the notes on that scale are natural. But are they harmonious based on where you are in that scale or in that key or in that piece of music that you're playing? Because the contextual elements are important. The contextual elements need to be considered. And this is a great example because it's an unconscious process. Because you don't have to think about it, you don't have to analyze it, you just know, your body feels, your body responds. You don't have to know anything about music. Someone can play a note and you can just know, oh, something's off about that. Someone can play a note and you just say, something is on about that. So really, it's not about what's natural, it's about what is harmonious. And what is harmonious based on where we are in relation to the scale or the key or the piece of music that we're playing. Because we might have a certain habit that works for us for a while, but then we get to a certain place or a certain point in the piece or in the song or in the key or in the scale, and then that thing is no longer harmonious, it's actually disharmonious. So the interval we need to maintain harmony is then different. So then we have to change, we have to upgrade, we have to reprogram. There's people who can go on vegetarian and vegan diets and extreme cleansing diets, and it works for a period of time. But what happens is they don't realize that it's for a period of time based on where they were. And really, once they get past a certain place, maybe it doesn't work anymore. Likewise, people do, primal and paleo diets and sort of omnivore diets. And maybe that works for a while, and then maybe it's time to cycle on or off to something else. Same principle applies. So why is it important to understand asking different questions? Meaning, what's natural and how can it be more natural versus what is more harmonious and what is harmonious in relation to these constraints or in relation to this context? Well, this is important because, as we said earlier, direction determines destination. As we said earlier, depending on where we focus, it's going to change how our genetics respond, which is going to change how we're using the energy that we are accumulating, how we're using the energy that we were born with. So it's important for those reasons. Thirdly, it's important because questions in and of themselves are answers. Which you can just think about that for a second and let it set in and see if you have any reasons. Because at first glance, it doesn't really make any sense because no, questions are questions. Well, maybe from a certain perspective they are, And from another perspective, questions are answers. They are answers because the questions we are asking are reflective and indicative and implicitly expressing where our mind is, what our priorities are, what our focus is, what our current state is, which in and of itself, those things are all answers. And going further, we can realize that the kinds of questions that we ask determine the kind of answers that we get. So if we start to ask better questions, we start to more clearly and accurately define things, then the answers and responses that we get back will very likely be better, will very likely be more in alignment with what we want and what is right for us. So now that we've understood kind of the fake side of what it means to be natural and really how the whole fake thing is usually just used to sell us things or to control us or manipulate us in certain ways, and we see how and why it's important from one perspective based on our pre- and postnatal essence, our DNA expression, and our epigenetics. Let's look at, well, what is real? What does it really mean to be natural? What is real naturalness really all about? So to easily understand this, we can go back to our existing framework, which is pre- and postnatal, or our DNA fingerprint. And basically we can understand that what is really natural is basically living a life that is authentic, living a life that is right for us based on our prenatal essence, our prenatal blueprint, or our unique DNA fingerprint. And really that's fundamentally what it comes down to. Because we can say that the prenatal essence or our DNA expression is stored in the body. It's stored in the cells. And the body itself has a deep and profound awareness of this, which it's something that it tries to communicate to us a lot. And then from our postnatal, we can understand that we can correlate this to really the mind and the conditioning that we're given by our parents and our society and our culture, and basically the homogenization, the pasteurization of our inherent creativity and our inherent gifts, which is important because of course that's going to affect our epigenetic expression, which is going to turn on or off certain DNA or certain genetic expressions. So basically, in a simple, very basic sense, that's really what it comes down to, is tuning into the awareness of the body. And why is that important? It's important because the body is connected to nature. The body is responding to the natural world around us all the time, without the input of the mind or the ego or the conscious self or our conditioning. And usually most of that stuff just gets in the way of the natural functioning of the body, meaning digestive problems, sleep problems, sexual problems usually occur because the mind is getting in the way of a natural process that the body is already trying to do. Or through poor mental conditioning, our lifestyle habits are affecting our genetic expression, which are then sort of dumbing down or constraining the function of our body. And we can understand that our cells hold on to pretty much all memory. And because that's sort of the nature of water and the amount of information that water can hold. If you want to be blown away, just start doing research on how much information they're able to store in water through scientific experiments and through using water-based computer technologies. It's pretty amazing. And the same technology is working in us, which we can say is genetics, we can say is water-based memory. But the reality is our cells are holding on to all this information, all these experiences that we've had, both prenatal and postnatal. And when we run into problems, it's because we start acquiring all this crap from the world, the conditioning about who we should be and shouldn't be and what we should do and shouldn't, and should do and must do and have to do, and that whole conversation, and that really gets in the way of the natural process of the body. And much in the same way of the example that we gave earlier, that sure, as mammals, there's a lot of things that we can't eat. We could physically masticate and chew cardboard. We can physically masticate and chew a wide variety of plants, but that does not mean that it's actually appropriate for our body or appropriate for who we are. And usually through the process of digestion, it's going to cause a lot of discomfort and may just clog things up and really may shut down the functioning of the body. Whereas other people or other organisms might be able to eat those same things and feel fine, feel totally good, receive all the nourishment they need, and keep going. So that's a really great example because it's not about the mind, it's about the body, and the body knowing, and the body having that same intelligence. And much in the same way are the choices we make, the decisions we make, the habits and the commitments and the agreements that we have, the relationships that we have, the way we earn money. All of these things and all of these factors are functioning in the same way as the example that we just gave about the food and the digestive process. So why is that important, and how does that relate to health? And this is usually something, like I said earlier, that people don't really want to talk about, they don't really want to look at, they don't really want to deal with, because maybe it's hard, maybe it takes work, it takes time, it takes energy, and it's a little deeper than just saying, well, just tell me what to eat. Just give me this little box of rules to follow. If I just follow the rules, then I'll be okay. Which, as we can see, doesn't really work, because it doesn't take into account the unique fingerprint that person has. It doesn't take into account the prenatal gene or the prenatal essence or energy that they were born with, and the postnatal essence that they're working with currently. In the same way that if we're playing a musical scale, we have to take into account where we are in relation to everything else to figure out what is harmonious and what really works. So we need to apply that same principle when it comes to health, because really health can be quite simple. It can be expansion or contraction. And if we're making decisions and living our life in a way that is not right for our unique fingerprint, or is not right for our blueprint or our essence, then what do you think that's going to do to the energy flow in the body? It's probably going to contract it. And if a person is continually contracting, continually blocking, continually stagnating their flow of energy in their system, what do you think is going to result? Odds are it's going to be poor health, it's going to be ill health, it's going to be dysfunction on some level, mental, emotional, physical, or spiritual, or all of them at the same time, which is usually what happens. And really, in that way, it is quite simple. And in that way, this whole conversation is of the utmost importance. And for whatever reason, the health community doesn't talk about it. For whatever reason, the alternative mental, spiritual sort of success, personal development community talks about it a little bit, but they ignore the bigger picture of how it affects the health and how it affects really the whole being. Because it's not about little separate areas that we work on this area, work on that area, do this area, do that area. Really, what's a better usage of our time is going to the core, going to the root. Meaning, if you have a tree, and most people just treat the leaves, the branches, the fruits, and say, oh, the fruit's so good, it's so sweet, oh, this is amazing, and really are just stuck at this superficial level. And really, that consumes a lot of time and energy. And what we need to ask is, well, what happens if we just go to the root? How does that affect the growth of everything else that comes out of that? And that's really the mindset that we're looking at here. So going further, if we're understanding that it's about expansion or contraction, we can understand, well, maybe this affects our organs and the organ function in a real physical, tangible way. Because in the Chinese understanding, or the Taoist medicine understanding, there's 5 elements. 5 elements, 5 organs, 5 emotions, 5 spirits, and they all are one and the same. Meaning each organ is a storehouse of a certain emotion, a certain psychological process, a certain physical process, obviously, and a certain spiritual process. So if we're constantly being bogged down by certain emotions, that's going to create dysfunction in the system. One organ might get really strong and beat up and sort of sedate and suppress the other organs, which is not going to create health. So in that basis, we can see the connection, because for whatever reason, however many thousands of years ago, they understood this stuff about pre and postnatal. They understood this stuff about the 5 elements and the energy centers. And really now it's becoming even more relevant because people are more interested in health and development. And like I really started this whole conversation with, we're searching for something that is natural, that is whole and real. And really what we're searching for is ourselves, is our natural self, is our holistic self. That's what we're looking for. We're not looking for driving a Prius or shopping at Whole Foods or doing yoga or doing Ashtanga yoga or Kundalini yoga or this Qigong or that Qigong or this diet or that diet. Those are all things which we think will lead us to the thing, but in reality what we're looking for is our natural self, or our unique DNA fingerprint, or our real prenatal essence that we can then express in the best possible way through making the right lifestyle decisions and choices based on all of these things and in relation to our epigenetic expression. That's really what it means to be natural. It's really what a natural life is all about, because it is, like we said at the beginning, this deep drive, this deep desire, this deep sort of appetite inside of us that wants to be satisfied. And we chase all of these things and we're not satisfied, we're not satisfied, we're not satisfied. So this year it was this diet, next year it's that diet, next year it's this diet, this year it's this thing and this thing and that thing, and it's this constant hamster wheel. But really it comes back to, well, how? How do we tune into this? Well, we understand that it's in the body. It's not in the mind, it's not in the conditioning, it's not in the society and the culture, it's in the body. Because the body stores our genetic information, and the sort of cellular intelligence or the water-based memory is in the body. And the body has its own awareness, the body has its own intelligence, has its own energy. And it's not about our mind coming in and making it do this and making it do that. It's really understanding the true function of the mind and then allowing it to come in and just observe what is happening. Perhaps guide, perhaps elevate, perhaps sort of transform in a way, but mostly just leave alone and mostly just not interfere with. Because once we start interfering is usually when we start to have problems inside of our body, and just look at the world around us. The more humanity interferes with things, the worse off things seem to get. Because our mind is so limited, we don't understand the whole spectrum of variables, or how interconnected and interdependent the ecosystem is, and just how delicate it is. Because the body itself is very delicate as well. It's very frail. So how do we start to tune into really what's right for us or what's better for us? Firstly, on the mental side is looking at all the deprogramming and casting all of the just false things aside, like what we've been doing so far. And secondly, it's about tuning more into our feelings, tuning more into our gut, tuning more into our sacral center, tuning more into our heart center, and paying attention to what those things are communicating to us. And really that is a choice. That is a conscious choice that we can make. And once we start to make that choice, we can remember that questions are answers. So we start asking different questions. Well, what is my heart saying? What is my gut saying? What is my sacral region saying? How can I tune into them more? How can I pay more attention to them? How can I become more fluent in their language? Those are all different questions which will yield different answers, and which imply and reveal that our mind is then in a different place, which as a result sets off different cascades of effects throughout our genetic expression, because our epigenetics, again, are our thoughts, our beliefs, our actions, our lifestyle things, which influence the genes that we turn on or off. So if we want to be ourselves, we want to start to be more of ourselves or really live a natural life, it's about tuning more into the feeling, more into the intelligence of the body, and the casting aside and letting go of the things that are not real. And it's a process, and it takes time. Life is a process. Life is a process of movement, so we really need to harmonize with that and set aside the idea that it's just going to be this simple process of turn it on, turn it off, and I'm done. Really, that's not how it works. It's not how life works. Life is always moving. So in the same way, we usually want to harmonize with that. In the same way of, we're going back to our metaphor of the musical scale, keeping in mind the context, keeping in mind that, well, we were here, but now we're here, and this is not really harmonious, so maybe I need to move up here, and oh wait, now it's harmonious, now it's a good interval, now it sounds good, feels good in the body. And keeping in mind that simple metaphor, that simple illustration, and remembering our foundational basis here. So hopefully that has given you an idea about what it really means to be natural. And it's a pretty amazing thing, it's a pretty simple thing when you start to see this in your life all around you. Maybe you had some experiences while you're sitting here watching this presentation right now where things started to click. And realize and remember that it's usually just about, one simple thing, one simple shift, one simple mindset adjustment, one simple insight that can really change how we see things. And just imagine how it would feel when we start to chart a different course. Because remember, direction determines destination. So imagine that we're really getting back onto the right course. And imagine how that might positively impact and affect our life, internally and externally, how it affects the lives of, inside our minds and how we relate and deal with other people. Because really that's what it's all about. It's not about just living a natural life and sitting alone by yourself in your house, in your closet. It's really about understanding that we're embedded in this matrix. We're embedded in this complex ecosystem. So really the better things are inside of us, well, it's very likely the better things will be in the external world around us. The more we have, the more we can share, the more we can give, just based on our presence, just based on us expressing more of our unique fingerprint or more of really who we are, which on the energetic level is transferred all around us all the time without us saying or doing anything.